If I was to ask my 75-year-old self what decision that I should make right now, would she tell me to take the sabbatical, or would she go like, would she whack me and go, what the hell were you thinking? Why didn't you take a year off when our hips were working great? Right. And
Yeah.
so that it became a no. The only reason why I would not have taken that sabbatical would have been fear.
Mm.
And that was not reason enough.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you're new here. I am so excited to have Dr. Latifat Akintade. She's a gastroenterologist, a money coach, and she goes by MoneyFit MD. She helps women physicians to get their wealth both inside and outside to develop the life that they truly desire. And she is just finishing out a year family sabbatical, which we can't wait to talk more about. But first, Latifat, welcome to the channel.
Thank you for having me here. I'm excited that I finally got an invitation to come hang out with you.
I know the first time I saw you in person, I said, you have to be on my YouTube channel. But as we were saying before we started, I'm glad that you weren't, because it's been an evolution and hopefully a little bit more polished, and that people will actually want to stay because they can hear without the usual tinging I had on my first audio. So good for you for waiting until the stars aligned again for us to reach back out and connect.
No, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And for the people who have not yet met you, I know we can start from many different origin stories, but let's combine the who are you with the MoneyFit MD. How did that all come to be?
Well, like you mentioned, I'm a physician. I'm a gastroenterologist. I'm based in California, and I'm also the mama of three little ladies. I have been in practice now for 7 years. Well, I quit last year, which was 2023, because I wanted to travel with my family. But prior to 7 years ago, I knew zero about money. I knew nothing about anything. I just wanted to be a good physician. I wanted to be a great physician, actually. I love physicians, and I've always had this desire and an interest in excellence. So you know how you have those attendings that just are good with diagnosis, they're just great clinicians. That's always been my goal. I want it to be that, right? I want it to be someone that could take care of my patients and know that I'm giving them the best care that I could give them, especially in a world where, there is things like racism in medicine, disparities and all that existed, so and still exist. My goal was to practice medicine in a way that would let me be in integrity with how I manage my patients. And so it was 7 years ago that I realized that in order to do that, I had to get my finances together. I had to be someone that was not afraid of being fired. I had to have my finances in such a way that if, say, I wanted to recommend a medication or plan for a patient and the powers that be said no, that I would not have to like eat my integrity and just go with the flow. And to be honest with you, the reason why I came to that decision was because I had seen a lot of physicians and burnout in medicine. And there's a lot of stuff that's wrong with our system. I think, as physicians, we overwork and all this other stuff, but there's also the part of us not practicing medicine the way that we want to that also contributes to burnout. That's literally it. And so that's what led me to figuring out my own money for myself. And I'm talking about starting from nothing. Like, I didn't even know who I owed in terms of my student loans. I did not know how much I owed in terms of my credit card. I did not know what a 401k was. And this was not a long time ago. This was literally 7 years ago. So I had to just start learning things by myself for myself. The other thing as well is, like I mentioned, I have 3 kids now, but at that point, I had 2 kids. And, I had gone through residency. I had my first kid as a 3rd year in residency, second kid in fellowship. And so I had lived a lot of my life apologizing for choices that I thought I did not have. And I did not want to do that anymore. Like, if I have to go to work in the middle of the night to go scope a GI bleeder, I want it to be because I want to. And I want to look at my daughters and be able to tell them that this is what it means to do the work of your life. Like, you can do it without guilt. And you cannot say that with all authenticity if you're doing it because you don't have a choice. So essentially, for me, having a choice and being able to give care the way that I choose to, that I want to, that I believe is the right way, is core to my being, right? So I learned money that way. And at no point did I plan on like having money fit MD or teaching anybody. I just wanted to not suck at it. Right. And so that was literally what got me started in my money. And once I started figuring it out, I was like, wait a minute, like I thought money was hard and complicated, and that maybe that's why I did not know about it. But I realized that it had nothing to do with the math. It was this whole like psychology and mindset behind money, and a lot of the fear that I had and limiting beliefs about money that really was the factor that was preventing me from owning my money. And so once I figured that part out for me, and it worked, and it wasn't even hard. I wasn't suffering, and my debt was getting paid down and off, and my net worth was growing, and I was understanding legals. I was having conversations. I was like, I need to tell all my friends about this. So I started helping my friends. Like, because I'm like, you know what? It's fun to have money, but what's more fun than you having money is you and your friends having money.
Mm.
That's the real
Mhm.
fun. So I started helping my friends with their money. And again, I did not want a business. I just wanted to be a great physician. That's all I wanted. But then, right at the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody and their mama were losing their jobs. Physicians lost their jobs, nurses, people were afraid of their source of income. And even people that worked at my own facility that were earning more than I was earning were worried about their own source of income. And I wasn't at all. And the beauty of that was I could now focus on things that money couldn't necessarily help with. I could
Mhm.
focus on the wellness of my kids, on my parents and health and love and all that stuff. And so at that point, to be honest with you, I was like, okay, I really had no choice because I knew that I had something that it almost felt, I will be honest with you, it felt wrong to not share it. And so that's how Money Fit MD got started with what we have now with the podcast. We have the Money School, which we've been doing now for about 3 years, which is where women come in and they work with us for about 12 months. Some choose to work with us for longer, but the goal really is to help them transform their finances, learn money, grow money, and really curate the rich life that they have. And it's just been an honor and a privilege to see the power of the work that I get to do with women physicians. And so, yeah, that's the journey here.
I love that you use the word integrity, because when I think of you, that's what you exhibit throughout everything that you do and all of the choices that you made. And as we'll go into the discussion a little bit later about your integrity as it came to how you managed your job when you left for the sabbatical, but also how you show up, and the consistency and the authenticity and the vulnerability and your mission to serve other people, as you said, because you couldn't keep it a secret. And when it came to being out of your values, like I'm Martha Beck, Wayfinder life coach. So integrity is like the core of, if you're living out of integrity, you know it. You use the word soul, like your soul dies. And even with burnout, like I think sometimes we overuse burnout as a term to define moral injury, which means doing something outside of your core values. And I'm a veteran and very in tune with the PTSD criteria. And I think so many people don't realize that working for the system is giving them PTSD, because they might think, oh, well, no, that's something that our military veterans are getting, and then realize, like, why do I hate medicine? Why am I having trouble getting into the clinic? But then if they don't have their money in order, they feel trapped. And that's what I fear is leading to the increased suicide rate that I'm very passionate about stopping. So
Yeah.
I appreciate your mission from that standpoint as well.
No, thank you for saying that. And part of the reason why I say that is I respect mental health. And I think sometimes a short segment or short piece of conversation can be taken out of context. And so I'm very, very careful about not talking too much about suicide. But 100% agree with you um, that part of why I do money for physicians is that
Yeah.
it's that. I don't want to disrespect my mental, our psychiatrist and, pretend that I'm an expert. I'm not, but you know, to say there's no relationship between hopelessness, helplessness, and that would be incorrect. But that's one of my things is I want us to decrease that significantly. It's never going to be zero, but my hope and my goal is that the work that I do with money, that's one of my goals is to impact that number. But I don't say that out in public for that reason, because again, it's complicated. I don't want to say that, oh, money is why people may hurt themselves. Hopelessness is complex, but it is one of them. And I do think that this is one piece of the puzzle that I can 100% help with.
And I'll speak from lived experience. So when I was an oral surgery resident with suicidal ideation and didn't want to change careers, a big part of it's because I'm an independent female that's reliant on myself. And I had almost $300,000 worth of student debt. And all of that, and I was working, I was in medical school when I was in surgery residency for oral surgery, and the crisis unit was, full of all people that lost their jobs. So my observations and my internal resonating with those people, that was like, oh my gosh, when one that was kind of an identity crisis for me and for those people that were having that acute increase in the instability of, do I want to be here or not? And so I share my lived experience with suicidal ideation and how feeling trapped within my profession because of the money mindset that I had, and the reality exacerbated that. And I do respect what you were saying, that we're not in the mental health field. And also, I get it.
Thanks for saying that, and thanks for sharing your experience. I don't have that lived experience specifically, which is why I have to make sure I'm even more respectful of that. But I'm 100% certain that there is a correlation, and yes, that's part of my personal agenda that I don't speak about much in public.
Okay, sounds good. So we won't keep talking about it for right now. But over the past year, I know that one big thing we want to talk about today, and the money mindset will come to be about, how do you make this possible for people who are like, I just want a time off, but people are so afraid to take even a week off, a time off, like a month off. But you took a year off. So first of all, you didn't know you were going to take the sabbatical until shortly you did. So let's just hear the evolution of how it originated.
Absolutely. I had no plans of taking a sabbatical. Um, I think there's a lot of things that I do that I never thought I would do. And I share that because whoever is listening, there's going to be things that you may think you can never, you will never, it's impossible, you're not that person, but just FYI, everything that I share with you are things that I never had any thought that I would do. I remember when I started my money program, I was doing one-on-one coaching, and I remember thinking that, okay, I was helping women physicians, but there were some similarities that I kept on talking about over and over again. And I was like, oh, a group would be nice so that I could have this as a group. But then I looked into a program that would teach you how to do like a course. And I was like, oh, I'm not ready. Maybe I'll be ready in a year for this. I launched my coaching program like, I don't know, 2 months after that.
Mm.
Right. So, and the same thing with the sabbatical. I had no plans of taking a sabbatical. If you asked me, 2 years ago, or even a year and a half ago was when I decided. So we took the sabbatical, family sabbatical, starting in 2023. And literally it was late summer slash early fall of 2022 was when we decided to do it. My husband and I had gone to, we're in Aruba. I had spoken at a physician wellness conference. And so we had a great time there. And I remember having conversations with locals and realizing how many languages they spoke. And I was like, whoa, it's amazing that people speak this many languages and that's part of their culture. Like it's normal to speak 4 languages. And so my husband and I were like, how awesome would it be for our kids to be able to get exposed into that? Like imagine what happens to their brains. Yeah, that would be fun. But back to real life, right?
Mm.
I'm a physician. We don't do that kind of stuff. So we went back to life as usual. And it was about 2 months or so after that was my husband said, that conversation we had, if we want to do it, I'm ready. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, the sabbatical. I'm like, I thought we were joking. I thought we're just having a conversation. Like we can't even just talk for the talk, right? So that was when I decided that, okay, maybe this is something that we wanted to do. And that was literally end of summer slash early fall of 2022. At that point, I mean, we've taken care of our finances. And that's the thing that I always tell people, taking care of the finances. I think people always say in case of an emergency, as if a negative thing happening, in case you lose your job, like taking care of your finances ahead of time is also so that you can say yes to amazing opportunities or inspirations that come in front of you, right? And so literally 6 months before we traveled was when we're like, let's do it. And then I talked to my boss, my chief at work, and poor guy. I love I have a great I had a great team that I worked with. colleagues amazing, my patients amazing. I do a lot of IBD, inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's and colitis. So I have a sort of like tertiary level of expertise in that field. So I'm kind of a chronic manager of a lot of my patients. So we have great relationships. So that was taking time off wasn't something that I took for granted, but I knew that people were not going to be happy about it. And I had to be okay with people not being happy about it and be kind enough to know that it was okay for them to not be okay with it, but also knowing that it was the right thing for my family and I to do. And the way that I make a lot of decisions is, and I teach people this too when it comes to like money and making and spending, is 6 months from now, will I be glad that I made this decision or will I wish I had my money back? That's one. So when it comes to like regular spending, that's a thing that I use that you don't even have to think about budgeting. Like it will help you spend in a way that's in line with your goals. But also when I look at my life, my dad died unfortunately at the age of 67, which would be 2 years after traditional retirement, if you think about it that way. And so now I ask myself conversations or questions from the perspective of like my 75-year-old self, which is if I was to ask my 75-year-old self what decision that I should make right now, would she tell me to take the sabbatical, or would she go like, would she whack me and go, what the hell were you thinking? Why didn't you take a year off when our hips were working
Mm,
great? Right.
mm,
And
yeah.
so that it became a no. The only reason why I would not have taken that sabbatical would have been fear.
Mm.
And that was not reason enough.
Money scarcity is a huge theme I've heard in myself. I've heard in most physicians I've talked to. And one thing that I wanted to kind of go back to, you mentioned with your dad, and I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your dad, and it gives you that perspective to be like, I'm not waiting. But also coming out of fellowship, you chose to go a route that I actually didn't get to tell you. I also went choosing to not go 1.0 FTE straight out of training. Can you share what you did straight out of fellowship?
Absolutely. So after fellowship, I applied. I knew that I did not want to work for myself. I never thought I would be a business owner, by the way. I wanted to work for someone. Plus, I did a lot of IBD care, which is best in a tertiary level care center. So I knew that's what I wanted to do. But at that point, I had 2 kids. I have 3 kids now. So I knew that I did not want to live a life of apologizing for choices I did not want to have or choices that I thought I didn't have. But also, I did not want to be I was going to work hard, period, but I didn't. I wanted to have a possible life, not an impossible life, right? And so for me, I decided that I was only going to accept a job that would offer me zero point 0.8 FTE. So when I was looking, I mean, there were literally women that I met on the interview trail that were like shocked that I had such clarity of the fact that I did not want 1.0 FTE because I don't think any physician should be working 1.0 FTE because 1.0 FTE should is like 2 jobs that physicians do. And some of them actually did tell me that, oh, they've been waiting to be granted approval to drop down their FTE for years, but it was never a good time. And so at that point, I actually had 2 locations locally that were interested in offering me jobs. And I pretty much told both of them that whichever one of them offers me zero point 0.8 FTE first, I would go with.
That's amazing. I love that you negotiated that for yourself. You've just captured so many wonderful lessons, especially that I would say women physicians, because that's who we talk to the most. Particularly you coach women physicians. It's usually who I see as well. The money scarcity, the challenge negotiating, the fear of what other people are going to think and how our actions impact them. Right. So you talked about with your sabbatical, you had to be just accept that people were going to be disappointed and not want you to take that sabbatical, and you had to do what's best for you. That zero point 0.8 FTE, oh, what are people going to think about me? We have to think, especially as women who already have to work harder in order to be even close to an equal pay. We always think we have to work as hard as possible to prove our worth at the sacrifice of everything because we're socialized to do that. But you had the capacity to step back and be like, no, not going to do that. And I really value, and even something to go back to now, I know I'm stepping a little bit back and forward in time, but the themes are the thread here is that when you were talking to your boss about your sabbatical and you got provided feedback about what they would want to negotiate with you, you chose your integrity and you really felt the options out for what's best for you while considering others. I'd love for you to share what that conversation sounded like.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm being very honest, and you could argue that maybe it's subjective, but I do think it's objective that I have an amazing work family. Like, I I literally go, thank you, God, for the people that I work with. Like, I locked out. Like, when you work in a practice and there is literally no one person in your practice that you wouldn't let take care of your family, that's the kind of practice. And so it took a lot for me to leave. I left something good. I left something really, really good. But I had to be, sometimes it's okay. And I think this is the key, guys. Like, we think you can only leave something bad. It's okay to leave something good. I had to leave something good so that I can hopefully be better, period, like a better person, a more grounded person, and do the work that I'm meant to do in this season of my life, whatever that work is, in all the ways that they are. But when I told my work that I was leaving, they asked if they should keep my position. They were like, they gave me options of two different ways that I could keep my work, my job, and I can travel and they would keep my position and I can come back to it. But honestly, at that point, I knew that if I was leaving, I did not know what I was going to be in 6 months or who I was going to be in 6 months. And I did not have a strong enough conviction that I was going to come back. So to have them hold my spot and then 6 months later me go, deuces guys, sorry, I know you all been strapping and trying, but I'm not coming back. I just did not think that was fair to them. So I told them, no, don't keep my position, get someone else, because again, I love my colleagues. I don't want them to be stressed because they're having to cover for me for an extended period of time. So I'm like, and if they had to, it is what it is. But I said, no, hire someone. And if I decide to come back, I'll just wait in line. And if there isn't, then there isn't. And, I do want to say that integrity is a really important thing. And I want to make sure that people that are listening are not delusioned to think that I'm close to being perfect at all. Right. And something that I will say is when you're committed to trying to live a life of integrity, it's easy to try to be perfect about it. And it's a reason why people may not do the things they're meant to do or take actions. So if you're trying to be decent, and again, none of us are perfect. So if you're trying to be
Yeah.
decent, make sure you also have your goal as being imperfect as well, and to do it imperfectly, because that leaves room for error for you. And that gives you the ability to be able to move forward without being stuck in one position. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. And it brings up self-compassion. How's your self-compassion?
I think it's decent.
Yeah, it's the one thing I find that you're absolutely right that it hinders people from taking action. And what would integrity look like? And also to try to separate your socialized self from your essential self, meaning your true self, because I find that those voices can be very hard after you've been practicing people pleasing so long that it becomes automatic.
Yeah.
So I find that's why it's important. So let's tell people how you help them with coaching, because when this comes up and people have a hard time examining their own thoughts, and you and I have had many discussions where you call out my thoughts. I'm like, you just like walk and coach in the best ways possible. So how can people work with you?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, I think you bring up lots of good points, especially about scarcity, right? One of the reasons why people don't um, take jobs or work less than full time is because they think it's because they're worried that they're leaving money on the table, but it's really they're afraid of not having enough money. And what I've come to realize is that number one, we get to decide what enough money is. And number two, okay, this is going to sound a little funny, but I think it's lazy and easy to to do amazing stuff with a lot of money, but I think it's so badass to be
Mm,
able to create amazingness with whatever you've got.
mm,
Right. And so I love teaching people how to be badass, because when you're badass, then you will make a lot of money inevitably. And then it just becomes even so much fun. Right. So the money is one thing, but managing the money and what you do with it is that's like the next level thing. And whenever I coach women physicians, when it comes to money, the way that I teach money is really different. And I've honestly had my clients tell me that, Latifah, we don't even think of you as like, why don't we say money coach? It sounds like like when you describe yourself as a money coach, you're not even touching the surface of what you actually do because it's so much richer than that. And so I'm like, well, we'll call it a financial liberation coach, we'll call it a wealth coach. But the bottom line is I want people to live a rich life.
Mm,
And one thing that I teach, and I think your audience may find this helpful, is when it comes to spending money, we talk about assets, we talk about liabilities. In the traditional sense of the word that's made popular by Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, it describes a liability as things that takes money out of your pocket versus assets put money into your pocket. So a lot of times when you think about like traditional culture, we're taught to spend on liabilities and actually not assets. It's the same way we like enjoy eating chocolate because of the sugar high that you get from it, right? But we know that that's not going to lead you to the healthier life that you want. So the key is if we can change from spending a ton on liabilities and spending more on assets, you will have money and you will have a rich life. So I define assets a little differently. And I define it differently because of the population that I work with in 2024, which is women physicians in a culture of burnout. Because if we define assets and liabilities just the way the textbook definition is, it's going to cause us to grind to the ground. So I
mm.
actually, I'm excited. I'm really excited about this. I'm have this swag that I cannot wait to meet. It's already
Awesome.
waiting for me in California
Yes.
that has my assets on it. I cannot wait. But there are four assets that I always tell people to focus on. Okay. Number one is you as an asset. Like I am an asset. Like I am not like I do amazing, like I am an asset, right? Like, and that speaks to my worthiness.
Mm-hmm.
My worthiness that was peaked the moment I was born. If you think about it, like when you see newborn babies, they're not doing anything impressive. They're just like cooing, right? They're like, cure, poop, sleep, eat, right? Sleep deprive you. That's what they do. But yet their worth is like 100%. Like our worth as humans is regardless of what we do. It's not because my self-worth and yours isn't because we're physicians. It's just because we're humans with a pulse. That's my thought. So number one is seeing yourself as an asset, not what you do, just who you are as like an asset. So spending on you as an asset, right? So things like your wellness, coaching, that's number one stuff. Number two is creating a life that's an asset. So what that means is being able to like spend money on my relationship, right? And it's not just only money, it's money, time, and attention on my relationship, being able to like get on the ground on my forts and like play with my kids, creating a life that I don't need an escape from. In fact, with the traveling that we've done, it's been amazing and I love it. And I'm so glad that I don't have a life that I was running away from. So my life did not suck. So people are like, oh, how's the transition? It's the same 50-50
I asked
that
that.
it was, right? And you're
Right.
not the only
Yeah.
one. And it's a very fair question to ask. But I think a lot of times people think when you go back, you're going to have like this down from like a sugar high. But like I've created a life that's an asset, and I will always create a life that's an asset. And I want everybody to create a life that's an asset so that regardless of what zip code that life is in, your life
Mm,
is an asset, period. And again, I'm talking about what you invest your time, your money, and your attention to, because you need all those three things. So again, number one is you as an asset. Number two is a life that's an asset. And then number three is buy and grow assets. So that's where like the tangible stuff like investing in the stock market, in real estate, in businesses, growing your business, making sure your business is profitable. Like even as a physician, making sure that you understand that you're working for someone, they don't own you, you're leasing out a part of your assets to them. So buy and grow assets. And I love buying assets. I believe that badasses buy assets. So I love badasses. I want
mm.
every woman physician to be a badass. So that's number three. And then the fourth one, it's actually creating assets. And I have that separately from number three because there's something that happens when we create. And I also think that this is part of what is impacted us as physicians when it comes to burnout. Like when last time I checked, I want to say 70% of physicians are employed, right? And so if you're employed and you don't have the space or the time to create, you are going to burn out because there's a part of us that is meant to create.
Mm.
And I want you to hear this from me as someone that didn't think I was creative. And now I understand that our ability to create is part of like what keeps us alive. So when I say create, like you having a podcast, that's creating. Me writing a book, that's creating. Me having a program where I'm thinking about amazing stuff and teaching my women physician, that is creating assets. That's different from number one, number two, number three. And, so that's why I have it as number four. So if your audience wants to change how they think about money, if they want their money to actually amplify, if they want to create a wealthy life, a rich life, if they consistently invest or spend most of their money, regardless of how much or how little is coming in on these four assets, I promise you their lives will change.
The investment in self, that one. When I first signed up for coaching, I was so nervous because it was a lot of money. And I realized my money scarcity, but also my lack of self worth. I didn't think I was worthy of the investment. And so when people come for coaching now, that was a couple of years ago, the difference, because coaching helped me understand where I was having some mind errors, some thought errors. And now when I invest in therapy, when I invest in going to the doctor, when I invest in nourishing foods to hopefully be an investment in my health, I feel so much self-compassion because I remember just a couple of years ago, I put myself last, as many people are going to be resonating. And I love that we talked about this, getting money fit and your money mindset, and how you support people not only with money, as people were saying. It's much more than that. It's building wealth from the inside out, is what I think of you. And I know that, think that's where I got from your LinkedIn is, so they should read that line to remind themselves of the importance of not just the money, because it is so much mindset and cultivating a rich life.
It is. It's literally the most important thing. And, I will give you another example. People talk about overnight success or get rich quick. And, it gets a lot of negative rep. So, like, even winning the lottery. If you look at the people that win the lottery, most of them go back to being like broke really, really
Yeah.
quickly because they were never the person that could handle that. Right. So, if you're not investing in yourself, nothing else matters. It doesn't matter how much you earn. And I always tell people this. I mean, it's not that it doesn't matter how much you earn, but what you earn isn't going to reflect what you want it to reflect if you're not the person that can handle what you want to create. So essentially, if you're not investing in yourself, I mean, I'm a money coach. I believe in being a good steward of the resources that I've been given, and I will never, ever, ever stop investing in myself. Like, you don't want to know how much I invest in myself, but the wiser I get, the more intentional I am about investing in myself, because I know that my job here is a physician, as a human, as a mom, as a wife, as a coach, as a leader, as a real estate, investor, as a writer, as a speaker, as everything that I do relies on my ability to raise my capacity and be grounded in myself. And if I don't invest in that, then what the hell am I thinking?
And that's a question that people need to consider right now. Like, we have the whole arrival fallacy, right? And like, I'll be happy when, and we put our lives on hold. But I was reading Arthur Brooks' books on happiness. He's like, happiness isn't a destination, right? You can't just be happy. You can be happier. And then, of course, the Dr. Tal Ben Shahar has coined the term the arrival fallacy that I just mentioned. And I realized when I was in oral surgery and I stepped back to say, what were you really seeking? And I was seeking this persona of somebody who didn't take shit because I felt I was being extremely oppressed, and I'm very sensitive. I'm like, well, if I'm this badass military surgeon, no one's going to F with me, right? And then you help people be badasses. And my new definition of a badass is somebody living their authentic life, true to themselves, and freeing themselves from the societal pressures that are leading them astray. Because somebody who is free, I look at them, they're glowing, they're free, they have this abundance to them. And I'm so attracted to their presence. I'm like, that is a badass, not somebody restricted because they think they have to be someone else.
Yep. Yep. Amen to that. And honestly, if I have to impress upon you or prove to you that I am, then I'm not. But if I am, then I'm doing it and minding my own business with it. And whoever wants to come along can come along, and who doesn't want to, fare thee well.
Yeah, well, they're missing out. So, briefly, I know we can't go into your whole sabbatical right now. I've already taken quite a bit of your time to help spread some wisdom, but what was your sabbatical? Explain kind of what you covered during this past year.
Absolutely. So what we decided was we started, my last day at work was March 30th, 2023. And so we started in New York. Our goal was we said, you know what? Let's visit 9 or 10 countries. That sounded manageable. So, but one thing we asked ourselves, we're really, really intentional. And we said, what is it that we haven't had before? What gift haven't we given ourselves before? And I go into a lot of this in the sabbatical guide as well, that I want to give myself during this time. And it was flexibility. We had never given ourselves the gifts of flexibility. So we said we'll do 9 countries, but we'll be flexible and see whatever comes up. If we're inspired, then we'll add more countries. And so we ended up doing 19 countries in 10 months. And what we did was we sat down and looked at different continents. So we decided we wanted to visit 4 continents, and we looked based on their location and also the times, the seasons of the year, because we wanted to make sure that the seasons were good. So we started in New York. We live in California, New York/Jersey. We were there for about 2.5 weeks or so. And then we did Curacao, Aruba, and then we did Europe. Well, flew into London, then did Italy, we did Portugal, we did um, Switzerland, we did France. And in fact, when we were in Aruba, my husband, were talking to some of our good friends who said they were doing a Spartan race in France. And we're like, well, this is our year of why not? So we said, why not? So we were going to go to France, but now the race was in south of France. So instead of going through, the Paris airport, we went to Switzerland and we stayed a couple of days in Switzerland. So that's how Switzerland became a part of our trip. We were there for like 5 days or so, drove to south of France, back to Switzerland, flew to Paris, and we just had so much great time. And then we did like Cyprus, we did Morocco, we did Spain, we did Nigeria, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. So we did all those amazing countries, and it was a lot of fun. One thing we tried not to do was we didn't plan it all at once, which I think sometimes when people start to think about things, they can overwhelm themselves a little bit too much. And, there's nothing wrong with overwhelm, by the way. I want to make sure I'm clear about that. Like, anytime you want to do something new that's different, the first step is always like the second step after your first step is going to be overwhelmed.
Mm.
Right? So the point was not to not be overwhelmed. The point was to get stuck in overwhelm
Yeah.
or make it overbearing or too much for us. So we planned it 3 months at a time. The other reason why we did that was there's so much going on in the world right now. We're like, we don't know who is going to be fighting who. So we did not want to have things all scheduled too strictly. So we said every 3 months, we already know where our place, we already matched our continents on our own calendar. And then once we're getting close to the first that trimester, then we'll be able to book the next one, which means like, Airbnb, flights, rental car, if applicable, that sort of thing. But it was amazing. I mean, again, we have 3 little kids, so we're doing homeschooling while we're traveling. They're experiencing different cultures. They're spending a lot of time together with each other. The other thing as well is, and I realized this pretty quickly, because when we did, so Curacao was our first international travel, and we were there for 6 weeks. And as a physician, and this part is really, really important, as a physician that was normally really, really busy, there can be guilt. You can call it mom's guilt or whatever. And sometimes we have to be careful because that could make us do things that would hurt us. And so when we started our sabbatical, I had to remind myself that the goal of this time wasn't for me to take over my children's life. The goal was for me not to now turn into an helicopter mom that ends a sabbatical with kids that have no ability to do anything by themselves. So I quickly positioned myself into a supervisory position, which meant that now I have this time to be able to slow down, let them make mistakes and be able to supervise and correct them easily. So even things like cooking, my kids became good at cooking during our sabbatical. Like, I mean, they're now 6, 9, and 10,
Mm.
and they make breakfast for themselves.
Wow.
They would get themselves, like, people laugh at the fact that, like, they're there, like, breaking the eggs, scrambling the eggs, making pancakes and all this stuff. Like, we will be there. They cannot turn off the stove without us. Like, we are right there with them. But it would, if guilt was what was foiling our action, our kids would not know how to do anything right now because we would be the ones doing it for them. So
Mm.
just be intentional and make sure that you don't let any drama you have about your past feed into what you choose to do during your sabbatical. It's meant to be a gift for you. It's meant to be uncomfortable. I tell people, I was coaching one in my program recently, and one of the docs there is going to be taking some time off. And I told her that the goal of rest is to go sub-zero.
Mhm.
Many of us don't go sub-zero. If you think about like X and Y axis, we get to the horizontals and we're like, oh my goodness, this feels so uncomfortable. I don't know how to rest. This is like,
Mhm.
no, I'm just gonna like overpack my life again, right? But you have to let yourself go through the discomfort of finding rest, and when you're uncomfortable resting, don't stop resting. Keep resting until you pass that zero, because your true freedom actually lies below the curve. So that's the gift that we were able to give ourselves during our sabbatical, was find our new sub-zero. And it's not all cupcakes and rainbows. If you don't have a good relationship with money, it will find you during your sabbatical, because now you're not working clinically,
I
or
know.
now you're doing things that are different, right? So just know that you being on sabbatical doesn't mean that life is going to be automatically perfect. You get the space to do the work that you need to do to become the version of yourself that's going to need to do the work that you're going to need to do. So a lot of grace, a lot of kindness, and get the support that you need. That's what I would say about that.
It's so important. I took 2 FMLAs when I was trying to figure out if I was going to stay in surgery or not. Both FMLAs, I had softly planned like medical appointments that then fell through because it's like the psychologist, his schedule, I don't know if he left or something. And instead of resting because I was so uncomfortable in that, I didn't have a formal coach at the time, but I coached myself to develop, like, to harden up and to give myself this motivational pep talk to go back in, right? Rather than asking myself, what do I truly need in these moments? Then it's different than what I'm doing isn't work. It's not working. Yours was working. You had a good, things were good. Things were not good. And I didn't give myself permission, which is a huge thing I like to share with the audience here, is like, what do you need permission for right now? Like, how can you give that to yourself and get that in order as you're considering the sabbatical? Otherwise, you'll take it with you as you just demonstrated and look back a year from now and be like, well, that sabbatical was more exhausting and now I don't have a job. Right.
Exactly, exactly. I will be very honest with you. Like, one of the things I decided that I wanted was people, and that's the key why your relationship with money. And when we say relationship, like your thoughts about money, and really does matter. And I talk about this a lot on my podcast as well. But I always remind people, like, when I decided to take a sabbatical, I knew that it was going to be a transition. So I always ask myself at the end of the year, and people think I'm joking when I tell them this. I ask myself, what do I need to be well? What do I need to do the work that I need to do next year? And I get those in place, because I think that's the most important thing. So even before I took a sabbatical, I decided on a new coach that I wanted to work with for a
Mm.
year. I'm literally stopping my work, and I'm hiring a coach, because, guys, it's deeper than we think, is actually the truth about it.
Yeah.
As physicians, we spend so many years in training, we've spent so many years taking care of ourselves. I mean, not taking care of ourselves, excuse me, that when you go from overscheduled to quote unquote underscheduled, if you think your brain is not going to come after you, you're in for some surprise. And I say this not to scare people. I say this because I want to make sure that when people take a pause, that they have the tools that they need. So the physician that I was talking about, she decided she was going to stop her program. Excuse me, her work. She wants to travel, and so that's when she signed up for my program as well. And now she's going to be, because the relationship with money is going to be important. And when I told her about the sub-zero, that was the first time she's heard about it. And I'm telling you, she's going to have a great sabbatical because she's not because she's in my program, but she's setting herself up for success because she's getting the tools that she needs ahead of time.
And speaking of tools, you briefly mentioned the sabbatical guide. Would you like to share more about that?
Absolutely. I have gotten so many questions from everybody, even immigration officers are like, you got 3 kids? Can I join? Can I be one more? Like,
Mhm.
what do you do? And all the stuff. So I've gotten lots of questions from physicians as well. And so what I did was I answered all of those questions that I've gotten. And I posted many times to ask people any other questions, any other questions. And so the sabbatical guide that I created came out of that. And I think it's like 30 something pages or so where I put together things that I believe were important for us, in addition to the answer to the questions that people have asked. I even have a workbook that's associated with it as well, that's included. And the key is this: if we want physicians to be well, we cannot keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. We
Mm.
have to do things differently. One of the things that helped me be able to take a pause was getting ahead of my finances and getting ready ahead of time before I even knew that I was ever going to need or want a sabbatical, right? But I know that for some people, they haven't done that. And so this addresses even how to like the money for the sabbatical and all those sort of things. So it's a free guide. It's for women physicians, and people can definitely go find it. If you go to moneyfitmd.com/sabbatical, good luck spelling sabbatical.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
You'll find it
Yeah.
there.
Well, that's a strong takeaway in itself. But are there any further takeaways you want the audience to have as we depart today?
Absolutely. Just know that it's easy to hear people talk and think that they figured it out overnight. They did not. However, it doesn't take a long time, to be honest with you. I think after the first 3 years of doing my finances, things were so much better. Now we're even going like abundant over abundant, but it doesn't take forever. And regardless of how you've been about money before, it's not too late. And I think that's the key. It's not too late. You're not too late. It doesn't matter how much income you earn or not earn. It doesn't matter how much debt you have or not have. If you want something different, you can make a change today that can actually help you, right? And I know that fear is the reason why many of us don't. And sometimes we make the mistake of waiting for the fear to go away. Don't let the fear be there and move forward anyway. I'll share a story real quickly about my daughter. One of my daughters, when we started our trip, one day she was crying, and I was like, "Hey, you okay?" And she went, "I miss my friends." I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry you miss your friends." I was like, "I miss my friends too." And so, I was like, "Do you want us to go back?" She's like, "No, I don't. I just miss my friends, but I'm also so grateful that we get to do this." And so we get to talk about having different feelings about the same thing. And it's okay for you to be sad about missing your friends and for you to be overjoyed about the trip as well, right? And so as humans, we have the capacity to hold more than one emotion at a time. So you can have fear, but you can still find motivation, and don't have to wait for the fear to dissipate or go away before you start working on your money, or before you start investing or learning how to manage your money, or learning how to invest in one of those 4 asset classes that I just talked about.
Yeah, we'll have to see a picture with you in the hats.
It's gonna be
So
so fun.
thank you, Latifat, for this very rich discussion, pun intended. And what's the best way that people can find you?
If you want to find me, you can go on my website, which is moneyfitmd.com. You can also find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. We have the podcast, which is the Money Fit MD podcast, which is where I share 1 to 2 episodes every week. We talk about all things money and mindset, and really how to build wealth from the inside and out as well. It's always my pleasure to meet women physicians. I want to grow their money, do well. And this year, 2024, we're creating more opportunities on how people can also work with us in a way that has various price ranges that will help them accomplish the goals that they want to accomplish. So if you go on our website, you'll be able to find the resources there.
And for everyone that's hearing this, if you're ready, put in the comments what's the next step you're going to take to live your rich life. And until next time. It was great talking to you today, Latifat.
Thanks for having me.